This is the practical component of the course, where I'm actually going to build out a network in a place that really needs it. And I want to tell you a little bit about their use case. A good friend of mine runs a very popular Italian restaurant in our local city, Al Fresco. On a busy night, they have 550 people come through the restaurant. At max capacity, there can be 240 people in the restaurant at once. One of the things that Alfresco really wants to be able to do in the future is provide Wi-Fi to their customers. Now, there's a couple of good reasons for that. One is that the restaurant is located in a very tourist-centric area of the city. A lot of international travelers come by, a lot of people looking for Wi-Fi. So the presence of Wi-Fi becomes a value add. It draws customers into the premises. Alfresco also focuses on customer engagement. There's lots of photos around the restaurant of happy customers meeting and greeting the staff. And I see from my friend's Facebook page how many photos there are of people taking selfies with them and sharing them around the world. This is great marketing, and the easier they can make it for people to share their experiences at the restaurant, the more free promotion they get from their customers. So having a network that draws those people in and then amplifies the experience they have whilst they're there eating their Italian meal and broadcasting that out to the world is enormously valuable for them. Now, Alfresco does actually have a network there already, and I want to show you the layout of the place, and then we'll talk about the problems they've been having. So let's have a look at the space they're occupying here. And it's really broken down into 3 different areas. They've got the main entrance area that also covers zones 3, 4, and 5, as well as the pizza kitchen. This is where people normally enter the premises. And it's also where one of the terminals that the waitstaff use is located, as well as where there's going to be a bunch of customers seated that ultimately like to give some free Wi-Fi to. Towards the back of the premises, they have another kitchen, the main kitchen, as well as an entree kitchen, a bar, and zones 1 and 2. There's also a payment terminal sitting up there that again, the staff also use. Then there's a third area, the outdoor zone. And this is precisely what it sounds like. It is an area which is not enclosed and instead has tables that are put out there each day and again has patrons who they would like to give Wi-Fi connectivity to. Now here's the problem at the moment. They have a Wi-Fi network, a very basic network. They have one access point at the bar towards the right of the screen and one access point at the main entrance, which is around the bottom left of that pizza kitchen up in the top left. They have huge amounts of Wi-Fi dead spots. And this makes things very difficult for the staff who have an iPad that can take orders from people. Now the iPad needs to be able to talk to the Wi-Fi in order to send the order back to the same server that the 2 terminals talk to, which is located in the bar. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi keeps dropping out, and the iPad becomes pretty much useless. It won't send the order back. And they have to keep reverting to paper and other manual means of taking people's orders. This is the immediate term problem we're going to solve. We're going to give them Wi-Fi everywhere. And we're going to do it in such a way that when later on they want to provide guest Wi-Fi access, we'll simply set up another VLAN and configure the UniFi environment to do precisely that. Let's start talking about what we're going to put in this environment. Now I want to start with where the internet comes in, which is over here around the entree kitchen. We're going to connect their existing ADSL modem directly into a security gateway. I've put it over here in order to sit it directly next to that connection. We're then going to connect that security gateway over to a switch 8 150 watt, and that switch is going to sit over at the main entrance. Now fortunately, this connection is already wired. So the cabling is already there to be able to distribute the network in this fashion. At the main entrance here, there's also a couple of VoIP phones. So having all those ports available on this switch is going to come in very useful. To control the network, we're going to run a cloud key off this switch. And of course, the cloud key takes a PoE-enabled connection, which the switch 8 150 watt has 8 of. On another one of those PoE connections, we're going to run an AC HD unit. And we've chosen an HD because this is where we have a high density of people. And ultimately, this unit is going to be mounted on the roof with the line of sight to just about everyone in each of those 3 zones that it covers. So that'll give us very good connectivity in that area. In order to cater for Wi-Fi down towards zone 2 in the bottom right, we're going to run an in-wall unit down here. One of the reasons we're using an in-wall unit down here is because of those 2 Ethernet jacks on the underside of it. We need a couple of jacks there because there's a terminal used for ordering, and again, this is where their server sits, over here in the bar area. So it's going to give us both Wi-Fi and wired connectivity for those 2 devices. Now this would probably be enough, but just to be sure, we're going to put a mesh unit here in the outdoor area. And of course, a mesh unit is perfect for the outdoor because it's designed to be weather resistant. So what this will ultimately do is give us plenty of capacity to connect all of the wired things in al fresco, as well as give us plenty of Wi-Fi, not just for the staff now, but for the customers in the future as well. So this is the bit where we're going to move on from slides and start looking at the browser as we set up the network in al fresco. So let's jump into it. And I'm going to begin by plugging in 3 of the new UniFi devices that we're going to install in the restaurant. So here's what they all are. I'm going to take our existing internet connection, plug it into the WAN port of the security gateway, and then on the LAN port, I'm going to plug in the switch 8 150 watt, and into that switch, I'm then going to plug in the cloud key. Now this is all I'm going to begin with, and I've merely plugged it in. So there's no configuration yet. This is just straight out of the box. Plug these 3 units in together in this fashion, and then jump over to the browser. In Chrome, I have the free Ubiquiti Device Discovery Tool extension already installed. I've done a few Ubiquiti installs before. Now this tool is essential because it is going to do exactly what it sounds like it does. It's going to help me discover the controller on the network and make the process of setting everything up really simple. So this is already installed on my machine, which is connected into the switch. Now remember, that switch also has the controller connected to it, and it's connected to the security gateway, which has an upstream connection via that WAN port to the internet. Now, doing this alone, again, straight out of the box, means that my machine should have internet connectivity. And because it's got internet connectivity, I can now browse over to unifi.ubnt.com. So this looks good. Internet is working. I can see the website. It's asking me to log on, and I've previously created an account there. If you don't have one already, you can create a free one now. Sign in with my credentials. I've got 2FA enabled as well, so I need to enter a token from my Authenticator app. And then once I've finished the authentication process, I'm now logged on to the UniFi website. Now there's a few things going here I want to talk through briefly. First of all, we can see Scott's controller and Troy's controller already here in the administration. These are other networks I've previously set up and I now have access to via the UniFi website. Now we can see that both of these controllers are presently online. There's 9 devices on Scott's network and 11 on mine. Now these are UniFi devices, so these are things like switches and access points. Scott has 8 clients presently connected to his network. I've got 17 on mine. And I could launch directly into one of those networks right now to manage it. But they're not what we're here for. Instead, we want to look at the 3rd row here, because we can see that there's a UniFi Cloud Key version 2, which is presently pending adoption. Now this is the one in my local network, and it's been identified by that Ubiquiti device discovery tool extension running in Chrome. Now, I'm going to make this as easy as possible and just go up and adopt that cloud key. And as soon as I do this, we can see that there's already a firmware update available. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times throughout this course that Ubiquiti continues to improve these products. They regularly release new versions, making them better and better with new features. So the first thing I'm going to do here is upgrade the firmware on that cloud key before we start doing anything else. So let's begin that upgrade, and then we'll come back in a few minutes and continue. So that's the upgrade successful. The cloud key now wants to reboot. And remember, this is a little operating system running on that UniFi hardware device. We'll let that finish and then come back and continue again. Okay, so the cloud key is back up and running. And we can see now there are a few simple steps. So the first is it's asking us to open up the cloud key controller, which is running on a local IP address. We'll do that in just a moment. Note the second point here, accept self-signed certificate. The cloud key controller is going to be served up over an HTTPS connection, which is not going to have a valid certificate on it at the time of install. So we're going to get a browser warning. Now, I don't normally tell people to click through browser security warnings, but that's the only way we're going to be able to get started whilst requests are made over the secure scheme. You could always come back later and install a certificate on that device so that you could have a fully encrypted HTTPS connection to your controller. For now though, I'm not too worried because it's sitting right next to me on the local network. The two remaining steps here you're going to see unfold in just a moment, so I won't bother dwelling on them now. Let's open that controller wizard. There's our security warning from Chrome. We're expecting that. So we'll drop down into Advanced and proceed to that local IP address anyway. And now we're straight into the wizard. So remember, this is all being served up by that cloud key. This is the controller running on the UniFi hardware. Now the first bit here is pretty simple. Alfresco is in Australia, so I'm going to choose the right country. And the time zone we're on is Brisbane. Now note also, we've got Enable Auto Backup on. And this is important because this is going to back up the cloud key configuration to the local micro SD card, which is inserted into that cloud key, such that if ever the key itself becomes corrupted, we can simply roll back to a version that's previously been backed up. And that's important because this configuration has the entire network setup on it. So we do want to be able to protect that. So we'll leave Enable Auto Backup on, which was the default anyway, and continue to the next step. What we're seeing now is a list of other devices which the controller has found on the local network. And we can see here that the two models it's found are the security gateway and the Switch 8 PoE 150 watt. And you can see the IP addresses they've been assigned there as well. Now we're going to make this super simple and just tick that checkbox right up the top in order to configure both of those devices and proceed to the next screen. So we're now up to configuring Wi-Fi. But remember, we don't actually have any Wi-Fi access points plugged in yet. But that doesn't matter because the controller is going to store this configuration. And when we later plug in those 3 wireless access points, they're going to inherit the settings which we configure now. So I'm going to begin by giving this an SSID. And in this case, I'm going to call it Alfresco Staff. Later on, in the future, we'll create a separate network which will be for Alfresco Guests. I'm now going to enter a nice strong security key and then proceed to the next step. This is the final part of the controller configuration. I'm going to define an admin name, and remember, this is to administer this particular controller which is running on the cloud key. Alfresco admin will do. I'm going to set their email address, and this is their publicly published address. And then I'm going to create a password which has great strength. Note also the checkbox beneath these settings which says use the same name and password for SSH access. We could always shell into this environment at a later date if we needed to drop down to a terminal level for further configurability. We're not going to need to do that in this course, but it's nice to know there's the option. Let's continue. All of that looks good. Let's now finish the setup. Now finally, I'm going to enter my ubnt.com account credentials, which were the one I used right at the start of the process to log on to my list of controllers. I'll complete the authentication with my 2FA token. And now this will ensure that I still have remote access to the environment, even once I leave the premises. Okay, so all of that is configured. There's one last login to do, which is to now authenticate to the cloud key itself with that account we just created for it. So this is the Alfresco admin account. Let's log straight onto that. And here we have our controller. So this is it. This is the basics of the network now set up. And we can see across the top here that we have latency and throughput. So this is what's going out via the WAN port of the security gateway, back out over the internet. We have one active WAN device, which is the security gateway, and one active LAN device, which is that switch that both the cloud key and the security gateway are plugged into. Now I can go and see both of those devices by going to the left side of the screen and hitting the devices icon. And here they both are. We can see under the model column the security gateway and that switch. Now, these have both been added as part of the setup we just did. They're functional, they work, but I want to do just a little bit of configurability. And the first thing I want to do is click on the security gateway, which will open up this properties window on the right. And this is consistent across every UniFi device, which you'll see here in the controller. We can click on the device, get a properties window, and then go through and do some configuration. Now in this case, what I'd like to do is give this device an alias, so it's easy to identify it. Because at the moment, the device name column just has MAC addresses in it. So I'm going to call this one Security Gateway and save that. That immediately updates that device name. I'm going to go down to the switch now, click on that, over to configuration, and I'm going to call this Cashier Switch because it is literally sitting next to the cashier near the entrance of the restaurant. So I'll now save that, and our network is starting to make a bit more sense, at least visually. However, both of these devices have upgrades pending. So let's begin by updating that security gateway. I'll confirm that, and as with the cloud key, I'm going to go away for a little while, let that finish, and then come back. Okay, so that's the security gateway updated. I'm going to do the same now with the cashier switch. So upgrade, confirm, back in a few minutes. Okay, so I can now see both the security gateway and the switch with proper names and running the latest and greatest version of the software. So that's about as much configuration as I want to do with the 3 units that are already plugged into the network. So with that done, it's time to add Wi-Fi. So I'm going to go away and plug in the APAC HD unit straight into the cashier switch. Let me go and do that now. So I've plugged that in. It's going to take a couple of minutes for the controller to identify the new device on the network, and then sure enough, the user interface updates and we can see a new device sitting there at the bottom of the list. It looks like an AC access point, it's a round dish, and all it has there is a MAC address, and then of course the IP address that's been assigned just next to it. We can see the status of this at the moment is pending adoption. And a really important part of adding units to a UniFi network is adopting them such that they become part of that network. So I'm going to go over under the actions column over to the right there and click on the adopt link. Now just before I adopt this, I might go and add the in-wall unit as well. So let me go and plug that in too. Okay, so I've come back to the interface here, given it a couple of minutes, and sure enough, here is the in-wall unit, now appearing down the bottom of the list and also with a status of pending adoption. So let's start doing that. Let's start bringing these units into our network. I'm going to begin with the ACHD and click that Adopt button. We can see a little notification pop up above that, adopting, and then the MAC address of the unit. And then as soon as I do that, the status of that unit changes to provisioning. Now, while it's doing that, I'm going to go and adopt the in-wall unit as well. And I get the same confirmation just above that link, and the status also changes to provisioning. Now that only takes a few moments, and momentarily it comes back and says, the ACHD is now in a status of connected, and the in-wall unit is also in a status of connected. So that's great. We've now got two different Wi-Fi units connected into our UniFi network. Both these are now functional as well, because remember, we already set up the network earlier on. We set up the SSID and we set a security key. But before I start connecting any new clients, I also want to go and add that mesh unit, because that's the last piece of the UniFi product suite that we need to connect into this new network. So let me go and plug that in. Now, a couple of minutes later, I can see that unit appear again down the bottom of the list here. And we can see that it's got a little icon representing what the unit looks like. We've got a device name again, and we've also got a pending adoption status. But you'll notice that this one has wireless in brackets after that. Now remember, this one is going to wirelessly uplink to the network. So all I've actually done with this unit is plugged it into power. So this has no wired connection to anything other than mains. And what's happened is it's powered up, and the existing UniFi network has identified it wirelessly and is now asking me if I'd like to adopt it, which of course I would. So let's now adopt that unit as well. So as with the other units, that goes into adopting status, then into provisioning status, and then eventually into connected wireless status. So now we have 3 wireless access points connected to the network. 2 of them directly into the switch, and 1 of them wirelessly uplinking to one of the other wireless access points. Now, as with the security gateway and the switch, there's just a little bit more maintenance to do. And that involves, first of all, setting an alias. We'll call the ACHD main entrance. We'll call the mesh unit outdoor. And we'll call the in-wall unit main kitchen. So this means that at any time, we're going to be able to look at the network topology and immediately know which device sits where. Now, incidentally, on this screen, just above the Save button, you can see settings for the LED as well. And I mentioned earlier on in the course that you can turn those LEDs off if you'd like. Now, at the moment, this is using the site setting. So I can turn these LEDs off across the whole site, or I can turn them off on a unit-by-unit basis. I'm going to leave everything as default at the moment though, and we can always come back and change that later on if we'd like. Now lastly is upgrades. So every single one of these units has had upgrades available since they were originally flashed. I'm going to begin by upgrading main kitchen and outdoor first. And the reason why is that they don't have any downstream dependencies. So let me go away and do that, and I'll come back in a moment. Okay, those are now done. Let's now upgrade the main entrance. Now, proximity-wise, this is close to the outdoor unit. So when I start upgrading it and it needs to reboot, it goes off the air for a while. And you'll see that as it does that, the outdoor unit changes to a status of isolated because it no longer has an uplink. So effectively at the moment, we only have one access point with connectivity, and that's back in the main kitchen. As that access point comes back online, the outdoor unit is now once again connected wirelessly. Okay, so this now looks great. Security gateway, cashier switch, and then the main entrance, main kitchen, and outdoor wireless access points are all connected, logically named, and all upgrades applied. I'm now going to go away and connect some devices. So let me do that, and then we're going to come back and see those devices appear here in the controller. So I've now connected a few devices, and we can see them appear here, as well as the UniFi Cloud key sitting down the bottom of the list. What we can see here, based on the icons in the left column, is that we've got a few wireless devices. So we can see the top one appears to be an iPad device. We've got Rafa's iPhone underneath that. He's the owner of the restaurant, so I thought it was important to connect him. My iPhone is also there, and then a couple of rows down from that, you'll see a wired connection. So notice that the icon is different, which is Troy P50. So that's my Lenovo P50 laptop. Now I'd like to name this in a slightly more user-friendly way. So I'm going to click on my P50, over to Configuration, down to Alias, and then just like the UniFi devices, I'm going to give it a friendly name. This is going to make it much easier to track these devices later on and troubleshoot the network if I need to. I'll go and name a few of the wireless devices as well, just so that we've got a really clear picture of what we're looking at here. Okay, that's great. They're all done. Now we can start to see some really interesting information about how the network works. And the first thing I thought I'd show you is we'll go down to the events list. And the events are going to tell us what's going on in the network with both of our UniFi devices and the clients connected to that network. Now the very first row here really tells a lot of the story of the value proposition of having this fast roaming environment. And we can see here that the Alfresco iPad roamed from the main entrance to the main kitchen. And we can see the channels that changed when it did so and the network that it was on, which of course is Alfresco's staff. So here we start to see how a device can move around an environment, seamlessly switching, or fast roaming, as Ubiquiti would say, between those different access points. We can see that it was only just before that the Alfresco iPad actually connected to the main entrance in the first place. And as we scroll down the list of events, we'll see all sorts of different things that have occurred in the network. And if we go far enough down, we'll get all the way down to where we actually started adopting devices. So this is enormously useful, and it actually tells you quite a bit about the movements of clients that are within that network as well. Now that we have the network set up, one of the things I'd like to do is get a really good picture of what their Wi-Fi coverage is like. So I'm going to go up to the Maps section, and you'll see here that there's a sample floor plan. What I'm going to do though is go up to Configure Maps. I'm going to go to Add a Map. I'll allow Chrome to see my current location, because one of the things that the UniFi controller can do is actually plot us geographically on a Google map. We're not going to configure that here, but rather I'm going to go and upload an image. And I've chosen the same floor plan image which we saw earlier. I'm going to call that Hamilton Avenue because that's the street that Alfresco is on. I'll save that. And now from the list of maps, I'll see that one listed. So let's go and grab that. It's actually quite large. It's a very high res. So I'm going to zoom out on it and then position it nice and centrally. What we're ultimately aiming to do here is to drop the physical units that we have in the store onto the virtual map here, and then we're going to see their signal strength and where our hotspots and indeed dead spots are. Now, whilst UniFi knows how much range those units have, it doesn't know how big our map is. So I'm going to go over to the left side of the screen here and click the Set Map Scale icon. With that selected, I'm going to drop the cursor at one point, drag it over to another point, and then go over and tell UniFi what distance that is. Now I've taken a close look at the map earlier on, and fortunately it tells us that that distance is 10.3 meters. So I'm now going to set that scale. Now that that's done, I can open up my list of unplaced devices. And of course they're all sitting there, I haven't positioned them anywhere on the map yet. and I'm going to grab the APA-CHD and drag it onto the correct position on the map. So I'll drop that near the main entrance, cashier switch near the cashier, the main kitchen in-wall unit over in the main kitchen. Outdoor obviously goes outdoor, and the security gateway goes over near the bar, which is where the internet comes in. So now we're getting to see all of the UniFi devices sitting in the right places within the alfresco floor plan. That main entrance access point is actually a little bit closer to the pizza kitchen, so I'll move it up a bit. Okay, that's great, but now what can we do with it? Let's go and have a look at what the coverage is like on the 2G spectrum. And here we go. Everything red is going to be a pretty solid coverage, and as you can see, pretty much the entire restaurant is flooded with a strong 2G coverage. Now, of course, this is just looking at the range of the devices, and it's not taking into consideration factors such as, is there a brick wall in the way? And that's something we discussed back when I talked about designing your UniFi network. Let's go and have a look at the 5G coverage instead. And what we'll see here is that it's not quite as comprehensive as the 2G. We don't get the same range on 5G. We get a much higher throughput, but just not quite the same distance. Having said that, when we look at the diagram here, that ACHD and the mesh unit in particular covers a really significant area of the restaurant that actually has people in it. And in fact, there's a reasonable degree of signal strength all over the place. And even where it's weaker, when you think back to the 2G coverage, that comprehensively covered everywhere. So based on this, it looks like we're going to have a pretty solid network at alfresco. Let's look at one more thing while we're here on the map, and it's the topology setting. And what this shows us is how these units are linking together. So we can see the switch up there at the cashier, and we've got the in-wall unit in the main kitchen hanging off that, the main entrance access point also hanging off the switch, and then the outdoor mesh unit wirelessly uplinking to that. And then of course, we've got that security gateway over in the bar connected directly to the switch. Now, particularly as networks get larger, being able to visualize them in this way is enormously powerful. And if you can set this up right in the first place and position all of the units on the map correctly, it's going to make life much easier later on when you, or particularly someone else, needs to support that network. So that was a map in terms of the actual layout of the environment. Let's now go and take a look at a topology map. And when we choose that, we're going to see all of our units in the network and the logical links between them. So going from right to left, we know that the outdoor mesh unit uplinks wirelessly to the main entrance, which is connected to the cashier switch, which is then connected to the security gateway. And then of course the main kitchen also hangs off that cashier switch. If we go and show the link labels, we'll get a little bit more info. And then if we show the clients as well, we'll see the other devices that are connected to the network. So you can see RAF on the main entrance unit, whilst my iPhone and the alfresco iPad are hanging off the in-wall unit in the main kitchen. So that's everything up and running and well configured. And that includes all the UniFi components and the clients that are actually connected to it. After we set all this up, I went and connected the remaining devices in the network. So things like the VoIP phones, security cameras, and the payment terminals. And rather than just show you the same browser interface we've been looking at, I thought I'd pull out my iPhone and show you what I'm seeing there. So here's the dashboard now. We can see the 5 UniFi devices in there, the 3 wireless access points, the 1 switch, and the 1 security gateway. And I've now got 9 clients on this network as well. 3 of them are wireless and 6 of them are wired. If I drill down on the list of devices, we see them all represented here. And if I look at the clients, you can see everything that is presently connected. If I move over to the statistics, I can see traffic flowing backwards and forwards courtesy of that DPI, the Deep Packet Inspection. And there's been a few hundred meg of traffic go through pretty quickly. About half of it actually looks like it's gone to iCloud. So I suspect that's either RAFs or my iPhone syncing photos and videos we've taken during the install. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the level of detail you can get from DPI. Now finally, one of the other features within the mobile app is a throughput test. So I wandered over near the main kitchen, ran the test, and we can see here that I'm getting about 240 megabits down on the iPhone. Now this device, per the connection info at the bottom of the screen, is presently connected to the main kitchen. And I can now walk around the premises and watch as this graph scrolls past in real time and shows how good my connection is in different parts of the restaurant. So that's a really neat way of testing what actual throughput you're getting in various locations around an environment. Now that mobile app will work remotely as well. So I can be anywhere in the world, pull out that app and see what's going on in the restaurant. Likewise, I can go back to unifi.ubnt.com in the browser, and I now see that Alfresco's controller sitting there on the screen that we began the configuration with, down there underneath Scott's controller and Troy's controller. And I can see that absolutely everything looks like it's working perfectly, so that is a fantastic place to wrap up the course. By now, you should understand what the value proposition of UniFi is, what the units in the product line are, how to design your UniFi network, and of course, how to configure the entire environment. I hope you've enjoyed watching this course on an introduction to UniFi. I'm Troy Hunt.